And yo, I am too hyped. I am too hyped for this card. What a card we got this weekend in MSG. Islam Makhachev on the verge of maybe becoming one of the greatest fighter of all time, taking on the super well-rounded and prominent welterweight champion Jack Della Maddelena in Madison Square Garden, one of the number one arenas in the world. And this card is a blockbuster card. You have half of the welterweight division's top 10 on the main card and phenomenal prelims just all around. Like, the UFC really tends to stack up Islam Makhachev cards. Last time we had an Islam Makhachev card, that was UFC 311. You had Umar versus Merab in the co-main, Yuri versus Jamal Hill. This one as well is absolutely star-studded, a welterweight blockbuster, and I am just incredibly excited for a card like this. The UFC is going out strong. I was complaining at the beginning of the year how bad the UFC pay-per-views were, but recently the pay-per-views have been honestly really amazing. 319, 320. This is up there with 320 as one of the best cards and most stacked cards this year. The UFC really just went all out with this card. Really special, happening in New York, in my home state. And yeah, there is so much to get into here. I have a feeling this is going to be a long one, but there is so much to get into. So let's get started, all right? First fight of the night in the early prelims. Baisangur Makhaev versus Eric Mechanico. Gonna have to go with Baisangur Makhaev. In case people have already forgotten about him, he went into the Dana White Contender Series, had like a very violent front kick on the stomach KO versus this random dude. 4 days later, gets called on to be put on the UFC 319 card. So he fought Eric Nolan, finished him in 2 rounds. It was competitive first round, actually. Eric Nolan was doing some good combinations. Sakhaev was kind of taunting, like doing kind of like that Russian Dagestani taunting. And he's Khamzat's training partner, by the way. So yeah, Sakhaev went in there, though, handled business versus Eric Nolan, his debut. Incredible. 2 finishes within the span of a week. That's the shortest amount of turnaround time any fighter has ever done so far in the UFC. So Baisangur Makhaev taking after Khamzat Chimaev's methods, because Khamzat Chimaev in his debut came back a week later to fight and was on his reign of terror, or the beginning of it. So I am strongly going to take Baisangur Makhaev to open up this card with running through this guy, Eric Mechanico. Like, I just think it's written all over it that this is for Baisangur Makhaev to once again get another finish. He clearly is young and has shown that he still has a lot to grow from and to really like emerge into a top middleweight contender. But he's at the very beginning. But he's having a rapid push because he was put in that big spot in UFC 319 since King Green fell off the card. And now he gets a chance to get another finish, go at 11-0 on a big card like this to open up the night in MSG. Next up, women's fight. Ain't going to talk about that. Kyle Daukaus versus Gerald Meerschaert. You have Gerald Meerschaert, who of course is the veteran, who still I think is one of 5 fighters to have the most submissions in the UFC. Good vet, but is coming off multiple losses, while Kyle Daukaus, I believe, is coming off a great KO win. And if we just check, that was versus Michelle Pereira. So we're going to see Gerald Meerschaert and Kyle Daukaus get in there. No real like big implications from this fight either, just another cool early prelim. And then the one fight that is not on here right now at the time of recording this, but is going to be on the card, is Mariscal, I don't know his full name, versus Pat Sabatini. Pat Sabatini is on a crazy win streak right now, but he did, as we he lost to Diego Lopez back in the day, but he is riding a very big win streak right now. And yeah, so Pat Sabatini, phenomenal not phenomenal, but like a really good grappler, wrestler style that I think could get it done versus that fighter. Just another cool prelim, early prelim, really great Pat Sabatini, who besides like those 2 early on losses in career, pretty big win streak. So yeah, Pat Sabatini. Now we're really starting to get into the amazing like parts of this card. You're opening up the night of the prelims with Malcolm Wellmaker, who is a star in the making. This guy made a quick splash on the scene, KOing that random dude at like on one of the fight night cards. I think it was UFC. I'm forgetting which card. You know what? I gotta look back. I hate like not remembering these things. So right, he beat Simon, and that was in April on one of these random fight nights. Maybe it was Kansas City. And then he took on Moutinho. They threw him in there against Malcolm Wellmaker. Like it was a quick turnaround fight on UFC Atlanta. And Wellmaker had one of the nastiest KOs we have seen this year so far. He really walked through that guy. Like the UFC knew what they were doing, just throwing a guy like that on there, who also got famously KO'd by Sean O'Malley when he had the neon green hair. So they just threw him on there to basically get knocked out by this dude and let Malcolm Wellmaker get a bigger presence, make some more noise, get the hype that he needs going now into the opening of the prelims on MSG. The UFC is clearly pushing this guy, knowing that he has that it factor to become a star like Sean O'Malley did. Same division, bantamweight. He's got that KO power. And Malcolm Wellmaker also has a great story. Came from a welding career, was doing welding when he started at UFC. Now he's gone into UFC full time. He's fully dedicated. He's training in the gym. He wants this full time. You know, he wants it bad. He's definitely hungry. I look at his social media a lot because he's got that it factor. He could be a star in this bantamweight division. And in his third UFC fight, he's opening up the prelims on MSG, a huge spot versus Cody Haddon. Cody Haddon, what has this guy done again? He coming off a win versus, but if I remember correctly, he's only had one fight. But I think this is actually the replacement for someone that Malcolm Wellmaker was supposed to fight. But listen. Malcolm Wellmaker, I don't want to get too hyped on him yet because, again, he did knock out 2 like very low-level guys that were one-and-done fighters, right? Like the UFC threw them in there for a 1-fight contract, basically, like just to help him like start to get the ball rolling. But this is a good step up in competition with a guy like Cody Haddon, another Australian prospect who's new in the door. So Malcolm Wellmaker, we don't know how legit he is yet. We don't know how deep waters he's going to go into. But it's hard for me to pick against the Wellmaker train right now. Like I'm going with Malcolm Wellmaker again to do some flashy KO. I think this is set up so nicely for him to just, if he could do this, a third straight KO to open up this MSG prelims, it's gonna be loud in there. It's gonna be a crazy moment, and I hope he does it. I really hope he gets it, and I think he will. He's got some great striking, and I hope, he's just continuing to get better and better in the gym because I want to see this guy rise to the top. Malcolm Wellmaker, exciting new fighter in his third fight. Then we could talk about this. I mean, I really don't like to cover too many women's fights, but they're clearly trying to set up the next contender for the winner of Shevchenko versus Zhang Weili. You got Erin Blanchfield versus Tracy Cortez. Erin Blanchfield, her last fight was canceled because Macy Barber had to pull out very last minute due to a bad weight cut. Apparently, she went to the hospital. Erin Blanchfield was heated from that, and rather than getting her right back in there, they ended up sitting her on the sidelines until now where she could take on Tracy Cortez, both coming off wins. So let's see it. Tracy Cortez is one of the few women's fighters who I know about, but we'll see it, I don't really have opinions. If I had to pick, I think Erin Blanchfield is going to hold back Tracy Cortez. I think Erin Blanchfield is going to get it. Roman Kopylov versus Gregory Rodriguez. Robocop versus Kopylov. One's coming off a win after a loss, and one's coming off a loss after multiple wins. In Kopylov, he lost his last fight to Paulo Costa, which I did not really see coming. I thought that Kopylov was going to put the striking on Costa and edge out that win. So Kopylov has been sent back a little bit. And then you got the mountain of a man in Gregory Rodriguez. Lost to Jared Cannonier. Then came back and had a vicious knockout on Jack Hermanson in UFC 317. Great prelim fight. Again, Kopylov versus Rodriguez. This is a great prelim fight. And who do I got winning? This is really interesting. Rodriguez is really big. So it's sometimes hard to just see how guys like Kopylov or Hermanson would ever get the edge over. I mean, clearly Hermanson didn't. Rodriguez put him out. And Rodriguez, I think, could also put out Kopylov. But Kopylov has good, he bounces around nicely. He has good octagon coverage. This should be a good striking. Now, I don't know if Kopylov just has that power, to really put a guy out, a guy like Gregory Rodriguez out. Who's he been in? Chris Curtis? He lost, though, to Hernandez, right? Hernandez submitted him badly. Kopylov, really, all he's beaten is, very mid-tier level guys. Gregory Rodriguez, too, I wouldn't say he's, higher tier, but listen, cool middleweight fight. That's all I got to say. Not too much on that. Kopylov's ranked 15, though. And then I'm so happy that the UFC came to their senses and moved Bo Nickal and Rodolfo Viera down to the featured prelim spot rather than having him opening up the main card. Very smart decision by the UFC. We're not supposed to give Bo Nickal these big positions anymore after he just took a loss to Reinier de Ridder. Let him prove himself again. This guy's out here calling out Hamza Chimaev when he just got finished by Reinier de Ridder. He needs to chill, reassess his UFC career, and get back in there. I think in between that time, I saw a thing where Bo Nickal actually wanted to leave the UFC and go back to some kind of wrestling thing, but now he's back here taking on Rodolfo Viera. And listen, this could bounce either way. I haven't really watched the Rodolfo Viera fight. The only time Bo Nickal has really got impressive wins was what? He beat Paul Craig and Cody Brundage in his last 2 wins. We still don't know how legit Bo Nickal is. Obviously, he has the very, great wrestling background. His last time at MSG was a very, critical performance. He got criticized a lot for it with Paul Craig. He was just dancing around on the feet, just doing whatever he could to edge out the win. Wasn't really deploying too much wrestling. Was kind of playing the safer route. For Bo Nickal, we want to see the wrestling. We want to see why you were a elite collegiate wrestler that was from Penn State or whatever the hell he was from. So, Bo Nickal, still, the UFC is very high on him. Clearly, they almost put him on the main card. They're pushing him to bounce back with a good win because, I don't know, he's one of Dana White's privileged boys. So, Bo Nickal is going to step in there versus Rodolfo Viera. And honestly, for Bo Nickal's sake, he better get the win because he's never going to hear the end of it if he loses again. It would just be 2 losses, but then he'd be 7-2 after starting his career 7-0. And Rodolfo Viera, I don't know much about him, but this should be, hopefully it's going to be a good fight. It's going to be a good fight. And, maybe Bo Nickal's going to get that win. So we'll see that. So, again, phenomenal early prelims. Prelims, just such a good card. Such a good card. Look at this main card. Beautiful. Beautiful. This is a pay-per-view worthy main card. You're starting off the night of the main card at 10 p.m. You're sitting there with the boys. You got the munch. You already had some crazy prelims. Now we're rolling up into some real crazy fights. Well, I don't know how crazy this one's going to be, but Benoit Saint Denis versus Beneil Dariush. Both coming off impressive wins. I thought both these guys were going to lose in their last fights. I thought Moicano was going to beat Dariush, and I thought Denis was going to lose to Ruffy. I thought Mauricio Ruffy was going to style on Benoit Saint Denis. But Benoit Saint Denis submits Mauricio Ruffy, one of the fighting nerds, which is actually one of 3 back-to-back fighting nerd losses in the span of a week. So fighting nerds, as we know, are on the downside right now. And we're going to get to Prates in a minute. But Benoit Saint Denis bounces back really nicely because before this fight, that fight versus Ruffy, he beat Kyle Prepelic, right? He lost to Poirier. He got pieced up by Moicano. Then he beats Kyle Prepelic, who was a replacement for Yoel Alvarez. Denis honestly got saved because he would have got finished by Yoel Alvarez. And then Denis ends up being Kyle Prepelic, and then he steps in there with Mauricio Ruffy. Everyone's like, oh, Mauricio Ruffy's about to style on him because Mauricio Ruffy was coming off that crazy wheel kick. And people were saying he was probably the best out of the fighting nerds. But Benoit Saint Denis goes in there and submits, and that was probably the loudest moment on that card. Like, Benoit submitting Mauricio Ruffi was the loudest the French crowd ever really got. So Benoit Saint Denis has gotten some of his credibility back. So now we could kind of be hyped a little bit for the Marauder again to get in there, take on a guy like Beneil Dariush, we know is going to keep him more with the wrestling, grappling. He's lost to fighters like Arman Sarukian and Charles Oliveira, took a very long layoff, and then got in there and edged out the win versus Renato Moicano. Wasn't the cleanest performance from Dariush, though. He didn't necessarily dominate Moicano. Moicano had some moments in that fight, but Dariush ultimately edged out the win. So now we're going to see Benoit Saint Denis and Beneil Dariush go at it in a ranked lightweight bout. And it's very interesting, but you know what? I'm going to stay on the Benoit Saint Denis train. I think Benoit Saint Denis, after he showed that submission on Ruffy, and the way he could also be violent on the feet, I think Benoit Saint Denis could get it done for his third straight win. Honestly, I'm going with that. I'm going with Benoit Saint Denis versus Beneil Dariush. So that's to open up. And yeah. And then Leon Edwards versus Carlos Prates. Oh my goodness. Yo. Carlos Prates, one of the most like swag fighters in the UFC right now. Really, besides that Ian Gary loss, has finished every single one of his opponents in a violent way, including the buzzer beater end of the first round, spinning elbow KO on Jeff Neal. Huge moment for Prates to bounce back like that. Was the only fighting nerd so far to bounce back. And Leon Edwards is finally getting the striker's fight that he's wanted. Leon Edwards did beat Kamaru Usman twice, which was his claim to fame. Headshot dead, right? Then got dominated on the ground by Belal Muhammad, got dominated on the ground by Sean Brady, and Leon Edwards will finally have a matchup where he knows he's not going to be having the threat of the takedown with grappler and ground control heavy guys like Sean Brady and Belal Muhammad. He finally gets a striker in Prates, but be careful what you wish for, because I got Prates to be dropping Edwards' body. That's what I got. Okay, how could I pick against Carlos Prates? Like, I think Leon Edwards is about to go on is just on a huge downfall. He's about to go on his, like, third straight loss. And it's just going to be worse for him. Like, Leon Edwards just ain't that guy no more. It's Prates time now. And I think Prates is going to go in there and I'll be so surprised and honestly pissed if Edwards ends up getting out this win in MSG. But I'm going with Prates. I can't be picking against. I think even though the fighting nerds are kind of like in a huge slump right now, Prates is going to show everyone, like, yo, I'm still here. Like, he's going to be smoking another cigarette pack at the press conference after he puts Leon Edwards out for another crazy KO moment in MSG, and he's about to skyrocket. That's just what I got. Prates to put out Edwards on the canvas in MSG. Dude, I love Carlos Prates. Such a fun fighter. Crazy finishes left and right, doing what he did. And again, I'll say it again because I'm just going to voice my frustration on it. He almost beat Ian Gary. He was 2 hammer fists away from finishing Ian Gary in the very last round of the fight. It was a little too late, obviously, in the fight. Prates got dominated all 4 of those rounds, but he really almost finished Gary. And he would have stayed undefeated, like, in his UFC run. And he probably would have actually gotten a higher opponent rather than Jeff Neal. But whatever, it's all in the timeline. So Edwards versus Prates. Super exciting, banger striker fight, but I think Edwards on the downfall. Sean Brady versus Michael Morlaes. Dude, they just threw this on here, and like, wow, what a featured fight to have. 18-1 Sean Brady versus 18-0 Michael Morlaes. You look at Sean Brady's strength of competition, right? First of all, as I keep on saying, I think Sean Brady could be a future champion after the kind of win that he displayed versus Leon Edwards. Complete masterclass and dominant performance on Leon Edwards. Just displayed all different types of ground control and wrestling and grappling. It's not the most appealing style for people, but it's effective. It's a different style of fighting that you got to learn to appreciate, like the levels that this guy has been putting on with his competition. Besides getting pieced up by Belal Muhammad, listen, Jake Matthews, okay, Michael Chiesa, Gastelum, Burns. I mean, Burns hasn't been in anymore. And then Leon Edwards, he completely dominated. But again, Leon Edwards Edwards was fighting a downwards fight in that fight. Sean Brady always had kind of like the skill advantage. Like Edwards has no takedown defense. He has no ground defense. He doesn't know how to get up. He's the complete opposite of Jack Della Maddelena. But yeah, Sean Brady is just seems like such a high level and elite guy on the ground, and what he's able to do and keep you there and have his way. But it's going to be interesting with a guy like Michael Morlaes. Both of these guys beat Gilbert Burns, because Gilbert Burns just ain't that guy no more. Like Michael Morlaes' last win was Gilbert Burns, who was his first real ranked opponent that has been in the higher levels before. It's really just Gilbert Burns. Before that was Neil Magny. So Michael Morlaes has not really been tested, right? He's still one of these rare undefeated welterweights in the division, in this stacked welterweight division, but he hasn't really been tested. And I think although he has so many great tools, like Michael Morlaes really does display great stuff on the feet, striking, a little bit of a ground game, and jiu-jitsu, I truly feel like Sean Brady, just with the more experience that he has, I think he's going to be more comfortable in there. He's been under the brighter lights before, while Morlaes has just been to the apex. I think Brady's going to get it done. I think Brady's going to have the advantages. I think he's more experienced. He's just a little higher level than Michael Morlaes. Michael Morlaes is great. I'm sure he could bounce back versus a lot of the other guys in this division, but when it comes to Sean Brady, I'm very high on Sean Brady, and I think he could be a future champion. Surely with this win, he would be the next guy up for the title, the next title challenger. But it really is interesting when you look at the welterweight division. I mean, right under this is, of course, Prates versus Edwards. Whoever wins that could be up. You have Usman, who's just waiting in the wings. I don't know why. Like, Usman thinks he just deserves a title shot after one win. And then, of course, the following week now, you're going to have Bilal Muhammad and Ian Gary in the co-main event. I originally thought they were trying to make Sean Brady versus Ian Gary, but it's kind of hard to decide who gets the next title shot of the winner of this and the winner of Gary versus Muhammad if Gary wins. Because then Bilal's already been there, but if Gary wins, Gary could technically have a claim to the title too. So, then do you do Brady versus Gary, or you just give the nod to Brady because he's done more? Brady has a really good resume at welterweight. And yeah, I'm going with Sean Brady to get it done versus Michael Morlaes. Okay, yeah, that's how I'm liking the main card so far. Then Zhang Weili versus Valentina Shevchenko. Really, this is a champion versus champion. Zhang Weili, arguably the greatest strawweight fighter, greatest strawweight champion. And then she has finally made the move up after really just having the dominant run that she's had in strawweight to take on Valentina Shevchenko, arguably the greatest flyweight ever. Valentina Shevchenko reclaims her belt. She had the quadruple series with Alexa Grasso, right? She lost to Grasso, then she beat Grasso. They've had this entire thing. I mean, yeah, she's beat all the women's fighters and then ends up beating Manon Fiorot to defend the title. And you just knew they had to make this fight next for Zhang Weili. Also, she had her little rivalry with who was it? It was okay, I'm not gonna, or it was Rosa Namajunas. I don't have such a strong knowledge of women's history, MMA history, and the timelines here, but right, she had that big fights with Namajunas, and yeah, just dominant all around with her championship run, coming off the Tatiana Suarez win. So this was the right fight. This was the next fight you just had to make while we still have them in the sport, because they could both retire very soon. And sure, if you want to say it's a women's co-main event, but it's the best women's fight to be made in the sport right now, to see who is literally going to be the pound for pound number one women's fighter in the world. And I'm honestly going to give the nod to Zhang Weili. I'm going to give the nod to Zhang Weili, to get it done. And don't expect a finish. Just never expect a finish in a women's MMA fight, but should be just some high-level competitive exchanges. And yeah, you're going to have to sit through it for 5 rounds until we get to the main event. Okay? So that's it. I'm going to pick Zhang Weili Might have to bite that later, but it's a great women's super fight. That's really it. And then finally, you have at the main event, JDM versus Islam Makhachev. Islam making this huge transition in his career. Not arguably, I think at this point we could say the greatest lightweight ever. And on the verge of maybe becoming the greatest fighter ever. Right? Looking for his second belt in a weight class. We've only had a handful of fighters that could say they've been double champion, the most recent being Ilia Topuria, who was chasing after Islam at lightweight, but Islam ended up moving up to welterweight when Jack Della Maddelena took the title off Belal. I really feel like we were really robbed of a competitive and high-level Islam Makhachev fight in his last fight when he was supposed to fight Arman Tsarukyan. I've never been more disappointed in my life regarding UFC than that Friday when they announced that Tsarukyan was pulling out and he would end up fighting Renato Moicano. We were really kind of robbed of a great Islam Makhachev night performance. We barely got any of Islam Makhachev. He just finished Renato Moicano in the first round. But this fight right here, we're expecting to go to deep waters, deep rounds. Islam Makhachev to finally get him to really be tested here. And Jack Della Maddelena, who is the bigger fighter, let's just say. I mean, Islam Makhachev seems to be doing a really good bulk at welterweight. He seems like he's very happy and content with it, that he's not going to be killing himself to drop the weight down to 155. He keeps on saying how hard that weight cut was for him, and he did look very drained. He's saying he's going to now be fighting at 100% capacity because he's going to recover a lot. He's almost going to need no recovery time at all based off the weight cut. And you have Jack Della Maddelena, who is now 8-0 in his UFC run, has beaten guys like Randy Brown, Kevin Holland, Gilbert Burns, most recently, of course, in a 5-round war, but won the majority of the rounds, which I did not see coming, honestly, versus Belal Muhammad. I should give a lot more credit to Jack Della Maddelena. I really thought we were doomed that Belal Muhammad was going to continue to get the division, although it would have meant that then Islam would stay at lightweight to fight Ilia Topuria, but okay, hopefully that maybe happens down the line. But yeah, he pieced up and really just ended up disfiguring Belal Muhammad's face, which I was completely happy and fine with and very satisfied. And that's why I love Jack Della Maddelena. And he honestly is a great representation of the welterweight division. Phenomenal fighter. Was amazing with like his takedown defense and just being able to get back up on his feet. Enough. Obviously, we could speak all day about his just beautiful flowing boxing combinations and how he's able to piece up just some of the best boxing in the UFC period. And yeah, he's put some people's lights out. He's lit up with the boxing combinations. He works with Craig Jones, who apparently has like the specifics training to be able to combat the Dagestani pressure wrestling style. But Islam's a very high IQ fighter. He's one of the highest IQ fighters we've seen. I mean, Islam Makhachev is the legend killer. Like, he's taken away some of the biggest winning streaks in the sport from the likes of Volkanovski, Charles Oliveira, and then in his last 2 wins were Dustin Poirier, and then, which Dustin Poirier did take him 5 rounds, and then he finished Renato Moicano in the first round. But when you look at the Dustin Poirier fight, and that was old Dustin Poirier kind of on the end of his career, who was able to take Islam Makhachev to that deep waters and make Islam Makhachev bleed and have some success on the feet, that leads me to think that that could very well be possible for Jack Della Maddelena. Like, this fight is so hard. You're going to see so many people have such a hard time picking between these two men. Like, from the very fact that they're both great, well-rounded fighters, Islam Makhachev has the advantage when it comes to the grappling wrestling. Jack Della Maddelena has the advantage when it comes to striking and boxing on the feet. And Jack Della Maddelena, will see how he combats versus a guy like Islam. Because, let's face it, Belal's not on the level that Islam is. I know Islam's coming up the weight class, but Islam was still very big at lightweight. And he could maybe be big enough. And he's very strong. Like, they're just a different level, these Dagestanis, when he's being trained by Khabib. Like, Jack Della Maddelena will definitely very well could get back on his feet, keep it at bay. If he keeps it on the feet in this fight, I think Jack Della Maddelena would win and piece up Islam Makhachev with the boxing, because he's definitely more superior in that. But, it took a lot of back and forth in my head, but ultimately, And I'm right now on a really good streak with main events. I'm on a really good streak. I picked from 315 and on. I've gotten all the picks right. I picked Jack Della Maddelena, 315, Marab, Topuria, Chimaev. I picked Holloway, and then most recently Pereira. And then, of course, we didn't have any kind of finish at UFC 321. But I think I'm going to have to lean towards Islam Makhachev. It's so hard to pick against Islam. The greatness, I think, with what he knows he has to achieve, his dedication to the craft, I think Jack Della Maddelena has not faced a fighter like Islam Makhachev with his level of wrestling and grappling. I think he's in for a surprise when Islam steps in there. I think it's going to be very competitive. I do not expect Islam to finish him early. It might not even go a finish. We might just end up seeing a 5-round insane war. But I don't think Islam's looking to play around too much with Jack Della Maddelena. It just depends how Jack Della Maddelena manages to get up and keep it on the feet. He's going to try to use some knees. Of course, use those boxing combinations. It could very well swing either way. It's a stylistic masterpiece fight. But ultimately, I'm going with Islam Makhachev. I'm going with Islam Makhachev to get the second belt at welterweight and become probably the greatest fighter. The greatest fighter. The GOAT. When he becomes a two-division champion. I'm leaning with Islam Makhachev. And yeah, this is just insane, this fight. It's really going to be amazing to see. The MSG is going to be going crazy. Like, this entire card from top to bottom just has everything. Super well-rounded card. And Islam definitely has a handful of contenders. If he should win, he has a handful of contenders to fight, which again, kind of like, you're like, why then would he fight? But you got to make the Topuria fight if it's there. But again, how could you just ignore like the line of contenders waiting, like Shavkat, Brady, Gary? If Belal wins, then he'll just be back in the mix. Usman, if he gets one more win, like there's still plenty of guys to be in the queue for Islam at this division. But yeah, that's it, guys. Those are my picks for UFC 322, this loaded card, welterweight blockbuster. I'm going with Makhachev, Weili, Sean Brady, Prates, Benoit Saint Denis on this main card. And then prelims, kind of feeling, I don't know, I don't have such clear cut. I feel like a lot of these fights, it could just swing either way. I mean, Blanchfield, I'm pretty confident on. Wellmaker, I'm staying on the Wellmaker train. And then these two fights, I don't know, it could go either way, honestly. And then, yeah. So, just incredible card. Incredible. Cannot wait. We are in for a good one this weekend. And, yeah, can't wait to talk about everything that's happened after it happens. Let's go.